Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Nflementop 100 as my chair slips from beneath me. Today we are dealing with 61 through till 70. Got some big names in this list. There's a little teaser trailer for you. How are you all doing?
Do you mean like
good,
long names or big names?
Both, actually.
Oh, good.
That's fun.
So the typical admin that we always...
words.
As opposed to jokes without words. I guess that's slapstick. A couple of names that... Well, no, a couple of bits of admin that we need doing, like always. So firstly, a couple of names we haven't mentioned yet that I think are about here. In typical fashion, I shall announce them. CJ Mosley, who was initially ranked 98, but I think could be here or higher.
I would say
around
he's
here.
Definitely higher than
98, yeah. Marcus Peters, we didn't mention.
I couldn't believe he was that low either, really.
So he's coming up to here. Kevin Byard.
He deserves praise for daring to egg on Tom Brady in the playoffs, really, and compare him to Blake Bortles.
Kind of like we talked about Micah Hyde last episode, didn't we? So it's kind of like a straight swap there. And of course, Zach Martin.
Yes.
Who, given that this is kind of when the O-line discussions start to really kick into gear, this is his kind of level, I think. And then, of course, there are a couple names that we've already mentioned. Telvin Smith, the linebacker for the Jags. Richard Sherman, we already mentioned. Jarrell Casey. Devontae Freeman. And finally, like I just said, Micah Hyde.
Yeah.
So then, looking at this set of 10... The two names that I think need to be higher, interestingly, two defensive tackles, Geno Atkins and Fletcher Cox. Don't think there's really any room for debate on them.
When the list came out, Fletcher Cox at 69,
yeah,
I
it's
think was genuinely one of the biggest surprises that he was that low.
I think it was...
Like, he could easily have been a top 20 player, and I wouldn't have questioned it at all.
We'll talk about, obviously, Atkins and Cox in future episodes, but there is the whole kind of thing, like, if you're a good player on a bad team, then you could argue either you get more recognition or you get less recognition. But actually, equally, another thing is if you're a great player on a great team, and in particular if your team, one of your team's strengths is your strength, i.e. the D-line, that might be why Fletcher Cox has dropped down to 69.
Individual placement,
Because, I mean, that's a fall of 31 from last year, which doesn't really make sense. The second best quarterback pressure percentage amongst defensive
when
tackles.
he was probably just as good.
Oh, like to
Yeah,
drop
if not better,
off the back of a good season seems a bit...
I mean, like, we'll talk about this more when we talk about Fletcher Cox, but like, it's the story I always tell about Fletcher Cox is that one Panthers and Philadelphia game, and it was Thursday Night Football, and that was his first game back from injury. And going into that game, I was quietly confident, and then I saw his I've used this term a lot, his game-wrecking ability. You know, he was the one instigating the pressure on Cam most of the time, and he was the one blowing the O-line up in his face. So, yeah, I think both of them are going to be higher. And we do have a couple of drops who I think, from the kind of original top 100 players who were ranked higher, who I think actually should probably be around here. One of them's a bit of a big shock, and I'm not sure if you guys are going to go with me on this one. He was ranked in the 20s. This is probably going to be our biggest drop. Cam Jordan.
Because you hate him because he's a Saint.
I hate him because he's a Saint, but equally...
I mean, I don't hate him, but, he's not...
He had a good year, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, but I don't think he wasn't pulling up trees.
See, I think he's an interesting example of how this list is just insane in that you have guys who... Like, say, Fletcher Cox, who for some reason drops so far despite being better. And then you have Cam Jordan, who knew who Cam Jordan was before this year, has a good year. And it's almost like overemphasized because, oh, wow, the Saints defense can play now, which means that every Saints player on the defense is great.
And that's not to say he wasn't solid beforehand. He was just playing for the Saints who were...
And he had pretty good stats this year too. But I think you're right, I think once you start looking at other players in his position... or even just other defensive players, you kind of start racking it up, and it's like, I don't think he...
I am shocked and amazed, but that's actually gone through. So,
lovely.
I remember seeing when the rankings came out, I was like, that's a... Nah, really?
Like, 13 sacks is not bad. Anyone who gets the double-digit sacks deserves to be in a discussion.
Yeah.
But it's not a top 20 or top 30
He's
discussion.
not so much... when you hear his name, you don't have the same feel as you would have to other D-line
Edge
players
rushers,
who
yeah.
just create
Like
havoc.
Fletcher Cox.
Yeah, like
Or,
certain...
a comparative one in terms of the rankings, Chandler Jones, who I'm sure we'll
And
discuss
honestly, stats aren't always everything as well. There's plenty of reasons
true.
why.
Cam Newton.
That's
every
okay.
time.
They're not everything, but they're also not an excuse. So let's stop.
Other players who had dropped, I think Trent Williams can probably come down around tier. Great player, don't get me wrong. We'll talk more about him in a second, but he did only play 10 games last year.
Yeah,
So,
and I think there's guys that will start.
Edging him out.
Yeah.
And then finally, Devontae Adams. Looking at the wide receivers that we still have to discuss, and looking at someone like Stephon Diggs, who's in this range, I feel like he's kind of on that level rather than
I
one
would
of the
say
grades.
I would say comparable there.
Yeah.
In my mind, I would.
And it's good. You've got to think about where we're ranking these players.
It's top 100.
Oh yeah, but that's what I was going to say about Adams in a way. That in my mind, when you were watching him play this year, he went through a lot. He kind of started taking that number one receiving role.
Yeah.
But actually, again, once you start putting these guys down in the list, I think 45 over-egged it a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think...
it may have been different had he had QB1 the whole way.
Yes, true. Very true.
Because then his numbers could have been absolutely bonkers. But
astounding. And I guess that's something we
if anything,
anticipate for next year.
Yeah.
Right, so that kind of decides our 10. So working through them, for me, the best player out of this grouping comes down to either CJ Mosley or Zach Martin. I love Zach Martin. I think that it's incredible. He's just got a new contract. Props to him. I think it's great that guard has finally been recognised the same way that tackles are normally recognised, and we're seeing that more with the kind of contract Andrew Norwell got. RIP, we love you. Please come back to Carolina.
He's not dead, by the way. He's just gone somewhere else.
He's dead to us.
And
wow.
I'm just there thinking, like, what's the simpler job? That's not to say either is simple. What's the simpler job? Playing linebacker at that level or playing guard
at that level? For me,
guard, in terms of difficulty on the line, physical difficulty, tackles is the hardest. Mental difficulty, center is the hardest. And then how many times do you hear people getting moved from tackle to guard because they couldn't play tackle?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, maybe.
I think Zach Martin is right at the top of his game, and CJ Mosley isn't necessarily. He's not on the same level as someone like Kuechly or Bobby Wagner, who we won't probably discuss for another 4 episodes or so because they're right up there.
Yeah.
But you guys know I love middle linebackers. I think they are the field generals of the defense, and a good middle linebacker is underrated in how much it can amplify your defense. It's why someone like Telvin Smith, when we discussed him in previous episodes, even though he hasn't done much in previous years, because he's had this breakout season, that means he's rated quite well.
And it puts, when you're playing a defensive system that puts a lot of kind of value on the middle linebacker, that kind of shows how important they are. Because there are defenses that kind of think, okay, we can get away without having high-end middle backers.
Like the Rams.
Yeah, the Rams are an example. We discussed them. And you're just like, well, they get pressure from everywhere else.
Yeah.
They'll shut down on the outside. So the middle backer position, which is the hardest position on the defense to play,
isn't so important.
Yeah, and it kind of hides from that, because if you try and play it and you play it badly,
you can
it's
get
a
exposed
disaster.
awfully,
I think it's an interesting toss-up, though, between a guy who plays on, when healthy, the best offensive line in the league by far, and a guy who is kind of a remnant part of what used to be a very good defense.
And it still is a very good defense.
Yeah.
It is when it plays well, and then they
Terrell Suggs and Ray Lewis
Yeah.
screaming at you in the face. I mean, Eric Weddle's still there.
Well, Suggs still plays.
Suggs is still there. And they are kind of they're maintaining it a bit, but it's not what it used to be.
Who did they lose 44-0 to?
I know, but they haven't had any. they haven't had any offensive production either.
Yeah.
Because it's Flacco. So
broken Black Flacco. Anyway,
Mosley or Martin then? I'm going to put my flag on the moon, and I'm going to say Mosley. I would give it the edge to Mosley as well.
I think I agree with that. I'm happy with
right,
that. Yeah.
Mosley. And then looking at the other names, I look at Martin and Williams, and given the premium, like we were just discussing how important a good O-line is, the premium we place, Trent Williams, even though he only played 10 games last year, 363 passing snaps, he didn't let up a single sack. That kind of guaranteed protection is immense. It's what Norwell provided to the Panthers. I hate to keep bringing it back to that, but it's a good comparison. It's what Martin brings to the Cowboys. And I put Martin above Williams because of what else he can do. I'm not, I'm no film studier. I haven't sat down and looked and compared Martin and Williams, but I know Martin, not even just based on that contract, based on his reputation, a great run blocker, great pass blocker, all-round incredible lineman. Trent Williams, I know he's a great pass blocker based on that stat, but I don't know enough about him to put him above Zach Martin.
Yeah. I think, obviously, the Redskins don't really have much to boast about anyway. Yeah. But that is significant on a team which for the last few years, for some reason, haven't been happy with their quarterback, who still puts up great numbers. I don't know. I like Trent Williams a lot. I think he's something that the Redskins need to be grateful for to keep. He's going to be vital if Alex Smith is going to actually, do anything. Hopefully he'll stay healthy for the whole season. But I don't know, left tackle is hard position to play as well. And to not give up any sacks in 10 games.
The hardest position.
That, I think,
I did watch an interesting video on this. It's kind of a tangent, but obviously left tackle is renowned as the more difficult position because typically your best edge rusher will line up on the right. And then obviously you've got a right-left matchup. And
the addition there is because most quarterbacks are right-handed.
So
they naturally turn their back. So if an edge rusher comes from the other side, the right tackle, the QB can see him.
Yeah.
At left tackle, if you mess up, the
QB
it's a free shot at his back. So.
But then what the Eagles have done in putting Lane Johnson at right tackle and keeping him there is a lot of the teams now recognise that the right tackle is weaker than the left tackle, and as a result of that, are lining up their best pass rushers against that right tackle because sure, the quarterback can see it, but you're getting better production. It was a video about the Eagles. It's Brett Coleman again. I can't speak highly enough about his content. If any of you guys want to go and watch it, just type it in on YouTube. Great film reviewer. And in putting Lane Johnson at right tackle, and the telling thing then was when Jason Peters went down, who's their left tackle, they didn't move Lane Johnson over. They kept him at right tackle. And he argued that was an integral part of that success. So I'm not sure how much weight I give to the left tackle, right tackle dichotomy nowadays.
Well, I think it's still a reality, though. That left tackle is hugely
Eagles
important.
Are definitely an anomaly.
And I think
in many ways.
From a quarterback's perspective,
you'd rather have a good left tackle.
You want to know your best guy is protecting what you can't see.
Yeah.
Give me a pass rush in my face before something I can't see any day.
Yeah.
And importantly, as well, as Trent Williams was left tackle on a team that finished 7-9, and they were never going to finish more than that. The Eagles, they had an immense roster that just kept getting better with each week, and injuries just didn't seem to be a factor in their season last year.
The roster was so deep.
Yeah.
Right. Let's just say it. Martin or Williams? Let's go around. Martin.
Martin.
You want to say Williams?
I do, but it's no point because you've got three.
Well, we could say Williams, you've got an honourable mention, but I would put Martin above Williams. And then looking at the rest of the names, I think I said this before, I don't think any of them necessarily touch those two O-liners. Maybe Peters.
Marcus Peters is a freak athlete who, in my mind, is a great cornerback, but actually, think about it.
You look at it and you're like, you can't get away from the combustible risk.
Yeah.
And you're like, he's very good, but he's a loose cannon.
I'd actually argue that the best thing about him throwing the flag into the crowd was then the referee had nothing to throw but his hat. And so he threw his hat instead. I think we get the point.
He's good entertainer.
Is that trained, or do you reckon that referee just in that moment was like, I've got to throw something?
I think they do have to throw
trained,
something.
Yeah, because what if they've thrown the flag already and they haven't picked it up?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I've reffed a game before as a sideline judge, and there was a bit of me when I couldn't find the flag, I did consider throwing my wallet. Because it was in my pocket. I was like, no. Like throwing gloves
loose
and
change.
Stuff. Yeah, anything you've got. I think I had a glove. I think I dropped my flag. So, right. I'm just going to throw my glove. Oh, no, I've got cold hands.
On Marcus Peters, though, I really hope that Wade Phillips or McVeigh just sort of bring him in.
If anyone can calm him down, it'll be Wade Phillips.
And if anyone can make him want to play for him, it'll be McVeigh. That's a good combination. It should work out. Peters tied third in interceptions last year. He's the only player with 5 or more interceptions in each of the last 3 seasons.
Yeah.
Since 2015, he's only allowed a 60.5 passer rating when targeted, which is second to only AJ, my boy.
I think the thing for Peters is he could be at the very top of the list of corners.
Yeah.
If he just behaved himself.
And cut out
so what we're hoping here is we'll rank him in this bracket deservedly, but he could jump so much higher if he just wasn't an idiot.
Yeah, he could be with kind of Jalen Ramsey, AJ Boy, Xavier Rhodes, even players who we haven't discussed yet. Peters next then. In terms of kind of secondary, Peters or Bayard, I would go Peters personally. Bayard has proven production, but...
And Peters' production as well, he's just... I think his ceiling's so high.
Yeah, that's
his ceiling is so high.
Whereas I feel like Bayard is playing and maximising his potential.
Safety.
I do wonder as well, is if with Peters it's a frustration thing, because ultimately he's playing on a team that could be the best team in the league for 16 straight weeks, and then still lose.
And they're not providing
and they're out again.
Which he deserves,
and he's a world-class athlete playing on a team that just can't break that barrier.
Seems to be a kind of Peters over Bayard then.
Yeah. And you kind of want to like him because he's so talented.
Yeah.
And I think he would fit fairly. I think he'd fit fairly here.
Bayard, by the way, love him. Great safety.
Yeah.
Led the league in interceptions last year. We've moved him up at the expense of Micah Hyde, pretty much. So fair play, Bayard. You're a great player. Don't be disheartened when you listen to this.
He made one error.
But he was patiently waiting for his name to arrive on our list.
He made one error all year, didn't he, Max? Really?
What's that? Oh, Bayard. Yeah, when he decided. You what?
Just don't call him out.
Yeah, I know.
Don't
Tom
bait Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Tom Brady, we're going to make you look like Blake Bortles.
Don't insult Blake Bortles.
Well, I mean, in fairness.
Not you, I mean him.
Yeah, I know, but like, if you actually go back to that Jacksonville New England game, Blake Bortles wasn't that bad in comparison.
Yeah.
I mean, you know.
He should have won.
What,
if the rest weren't paid? I would have voted for Balls for MVP.
A Jags Eagles
get a vote.
Next up I think that's a fair kind of top five in this kind of 60 to 70 bracket. We've got Sue, Cam Jordan, Devontae Adams, Zach Ertz, Stephon Diggs. There's a nice split here between D-line and receivers. We'll deal with the receivers first. Out of those three, Zach Ertz, Devontae Adams, Zach Ertz, and Stephon Diggs. Zach Ertz obviously wins points for being a tight end. Nice, easy target. Devontae Adams, Max, you're quite big on him, aren't you?
I like Devontae Adams. I've always liked him. I think
I'd rate, just to cut you off, sorry Max, I'd put Diggs at the bottom of that three.
Yeah, I'd agree.
And then so I think it's a toss-up between Adams and Ertz.
And I personally would put Adams above Ertz, considering this whole 50-50 thing again. I think productivity for Adams has grown throughout the years, especially as the Packers, and if you're a Packers fan, I'd actually be slightly worried, I don't know, how their receiving core is slowly shrunken over time to the point where Adams is now Owen and Randall Cobb.
But they've brought people in. But
Equanimeous and Brown.
Yeah.
Who, interestingly enough, there's a video on YouTube about this, he's the oldest of three brothers who all play receiver, all have D1 have either played D1 or have D1 offers, been trained by their dad since they were 5, 7, and 9, and have been compared to a less mental ball family from basketball.
Oh, yeah.
It's unbelievable.
I tell you what, I'd love for that to eventually be a thing.
The youngest one is called Arman Ra St. Brown.
Ra.
The dad's name isn't even St. Brown, it's Brown. He just thought Saint sounded a bit more. Honestly, it's unbelievable.
All my children are Saints.
That's a better name than Lonzo Ball, but okay.
Who's the father in the Ball family?
LeVar.
He played tight end for the Panthers.
Oh, he's like practice squad, wasn't he? Or like training camp.
Yeah, but he was the best thing since sliced bread. What are you talking about? Anyway,
just sort of going back to Stephon Diggs,
NFL.
I think NFL. I agree. Probably of those three, he is probably at the bottom. But it'll be interesting to see what he does next year without the sort of Case Keenum, Adam Thielen connection, because that seemed to be a big thing last year. And it'll be interesting to see whether his workload
grows out. Yeah.
Thielen was like the safety valve.
But Cousins, he can spread it around, can Cousins? So.
And in fairness, Thielen wasn't a proved player last year either. He'd been in the league a few years.
But he was ascending, wasn't he? He was a good player, and you were like, oh yeah, he's got it. But he wasn't like top.
Yeah.
And I would say
it'd be interesting to see where Thielen ends up in our rankings. I reckon he'll be in top 50 at least.
Well, we'll get there, won't we?
We'll see.
But Diggs,
I think Diggs probably at the bottom of that group.
And I think you'd listening, kind of agreeing with Max to probably take Cobb slightly
Adams
ahead
over
of. Oh, yeah, sorry, my bad. Adams over.
And then would you take any of those receivers over the two D linemen, Sue and Jordan?
Sue and Jordan.
I value as you know, I value the D-line so much. But I don't know.
It's just the kind of dependent and independent positions. Receiver, you're dependent on a good quarterback, and D-line, you can be that game wrecker, to use my own term, without...
If I was a GM and you were like, right, you can have any one of those receivers or one of these D-line, I'd be thinking, I'm taking the pressure up front, thanks. I'm going to take the D-line.
I don't know.
I would take Sue over those three. Jordan, I'm not sure about.
I'll be tempted by someone like Ertz, just because thinking about tight ends and thinking about other tight ends there are.
Olsen.
I mean, there's obviously Gronkowski, who's sort of
Gronk
above and beyond.
Yeah, but I don't think the fact that he's a tight end should elevate, like, because we're doing it on performance, right?
Yeah. And positional value comes into that, of course. For sure, but being a tight end doesn't.
Also,
you're a nice safety blanket.
Remember with the Eagles last year, it wasn't just Zach Ertz, it was Trey Burton as well.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the name of the third guy who is still there, but he is the definitive third guy.
Yeah.
But the point is they had three tight ends that were doing it. I think the reason Burton left was because Ertz, in the end, because of what happened in the playoffs and the Super Bowl, was like definitive number one.
Yeah.
Trey Burton is good enough to be a number one now in Chicago. So I think on productivity last year, I would be less willing to put Ertz above.
I'm just thinking, like, if I'm a GM and you came in and you were like, here are your 5 players, who are you having? You can pick one. I'm looking at it, I'm like, I'm taking Sue.
Yeah.
I'm just straight taking
proven track record.
I mean, I like Adams, but I would put Sue above Adams.
And that's to say, I don't like Sue. I think he could do more. He hasn't maximised his potential.
He could sue more.
Well, Sue could have been top 20 every year since he came into the league if he just developed his game.
Yeah.
Like, he came in at the same time as McCoy, and all he's ever been is a bull rusher. And he's
McCoy, interestingly, not in this list, is he? In the official top 100?
No, not officially.
It might be something we need to address.
Oh, we might.
I think you're right. It's almost like complacency with Sue, and I don't know if it's because he feels like he's stuck in Miami. Obviously, he's not anymore.
Yeah, but he was a nightmare in Detroit as well.
Yeah,
he wasn't a nightmare in college, but he's big enough and scary enough that he can be. He's big and scary, and when he bull rushes, he's ridiculous. You need to put a double team on him. So he could be better, but he is still very good.
I'd put him above Cam Jordan.
That 5, like I said, I'm taking Sue all day long.
Would you put then Cam Jordan above Adams? That's the final decision.
I
probably
would
not, to be fair.
No. Okay, cool. Right, so 61 to 70 is as thus. CJ Mosley at 61, Zach Martin 62, Trent Williams 63, Marcus Peters at 64, Kevin Byard at 65, Donkey Kong Sue at 66, Cameron Waste of Space Jordan at 67, Devontae Adams at 6. Oh no, I got that wrong, didn't I? Devontae Adams at 67, Cameron Waste of Space Jordan at 68, Zach. Oh, I had a really good joke for this, but I can't remember. Zach Ertz car rental, if anyone gets that one. At 69. And Stefan, do you digs this at 70?
I'll give you do you digs this.
Yeah. That's all for today's episode. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. And excuse me for that. All that good stuff. Please share it around. Really does help us out. We're trying to get ourselves known, as you all know. If you missed any of the previous episodes, make sure you check them out. They're all on our channel. Equally, stay tuned. We've got all the next ones coming up at you in the next couple of weeks. Thank you very, very, very much for watching. See you later. All the best.